say it's going to be.
Good morning to all of our listeners. It's an absolutely gorgeous
Ladies
day
and gentlemen,
here in the home of America's team. We are coming to you from Frisco.
Yep.
It's one of those days that it's crystal clear outside. The colors are popping, and it's just an amazing, little bit chilly, but I'm enjoying the last of it because we're about to get hot.
Yes, and it's a great weekend for golf because we've got the Masters going on right now. And
what?
It's just a great weekend for golf.
I have to say this.
What's that?
And I'm not a golfer.
I know.
But even the public courses in that part of Georgia
are
amazing.
It is. There's so much about that golf course, and I mean, there must be some kind of special dirt in there to make that grass that green and that perfect. Yeah. I mean, I'm sure the superintendent of that golf course gets taken care of very well to keep that golf course the way it is. But amazing, just first class all the way. And of course, you watch the Masters, and you got to say, "Well, I can do that." No, you can't.
And we're going to close out the show today talking a little golf, but we'll get to that.
We will.
And so on this absolutely gorgeous day, we're going to start. I'm going to kick it over to my partner in crime, and we're going to pay tribute to a couple of Americans.
First things first, not sure if they're even awake or listening. I got to give just a personal, non-military, but just one individual who was definitely an inspiration to me and certainly countless amounts of other people. One of my very dearest and oldest friends growing up as a kid. I remember when his sister was born. Unfortunately, my good friend Adam lost his younger sister on Wednesday. Very tragic and unfortunate loss. Sadly, today would have been her 33rd birthday. Wow. So it was very heartbreaking. So to the entire Ostrager family, I've been in touch with you guys quite a bit this week. And again, my heartfelt condolences to you and everyone who knows you. And, Amy had touched them. My thoughts and prayers are definitely out there to you all.
I only wish I had the words. So moving more to a national scale, America lost its last Army Medal of Honor recipient this week, 99 years old, 99 years young, going strong was Charles Coolidge, earned the Medal of Honor. Interestingly enough, managed to do it without earning a Purple Heart. He came through the incident unscathed.
That is
pretty amazing.
Amazing is an understatement on that. And not only that, but only 3 months shy of his 100th birthday.
Yep. Which is probably, for him, is probably a tragedy. That was probably one of his goals. I know it is Woody Williams' goal. And unfortunately, we are down to one surviving Medal of Honor recipient from World War II.
And that's Woody.
And it's one of the things that we talk about on the show. We try to pay tribute. We try to educate. We're actually going to talk about and drill into that concept a little bit more, but something we talked about when we told the story of Douglas Murno last week, who is the only Coast Guardsman to earn the Medal of Honor, which he did on Guadalcanal in World War II. He unfortunately died in that incident, certainly earning his Purple Heart, but his last words kind of pivoted us into a conversation. He was rescuing a battalion of Marines, and he was the officer in charge of a group of 24 landing barges. He had placed his landing barge between the beach and the Japanese, was taking withering fire, doing his best to return fire, and was hit several times. With his last words, did we get my Marines off? And we talked about, and this is true, as I have started to read more and more Medal of Honor citations, we talked about the selfless devotion to others when we were discussing Medal of Honor Day a week ago. And that thought has really stuck with me over the last week. In almost every case, these men did not care.
No greater love than to lay down your life for your brother.
Absolutely.
And any Medal of Honor recipient you've ever speak to echoes those words tremendously. You know, they're not thinking about themselves. They're certainly not thinking about the blue ribbon that may be placed around their neck. That's the farthest thing from their mind. And yet these men and one woman that we discovered went above and beyond the call of duty, above and beyond any sort of expectation that could be exhibited. Countless amounts of action demonstrate what they did and their character. But, you know, they are part of the fabric of some of the topics we'll be talking about today in the show, where, you know, countless amounts of sacrifice and things for the greater good of their fellow brothers and sisters in arms, to the good of our nation, to our object. I mean, we'll be talking today quite a bit about history and events that really shaped who we are in America, global society. I mean, there's going to be topics today. We're letting you all know today. Today is going to be probably one of our biggest knowledge bomb days you can really think of, because of what happened, if you will, in the last 48 hours in history, these dates, how many absolute significant earth changing, and I have to use the word earth changing because they changed.
We're going to talk about some issues that dramatically shaped not just America, but the world. And it's what's amazing is how many of them happened on April 10th.
And 9th and 10th, yeah.
Or would spin off
because of
that we want to do. And we're going to try to tie this together. Andrew's going to talk a little bit later, and he is going to tie some of this to where we're at today. And it's one of the things that I truly believe America is a little bit lost today.
Yeah, absolutely. Do we want to start off with the first one?
Are we ready to go?
Well, you're ready to keep talking.
Yeah. Well, you know what?
Okay. So
in the interest of time, I mean, and we do have graphics that will be coming up, but you know what? Some of these events, while we may not have the graphics up there right now, if you've ever picked up a history book, if you've ever sat through an 8th grade U.S. history class, these are events. And not only are they events, but if you've been watching the news in the last year, some of these things actually pertain directly to what is going on. So do you want me to take the first one, or do you want to take? All right. The very first one that we're going to talk about and in history is on this date in 1865. Robert E. Lee, commander of the Virginia,
the Northern Virginia
Army. Remember, he was only the commander of the Confederate Army for about 3 months, I think, but it was more of a full, because he never wanted the command of the full Confederate Army. Right. Robert E. Lee, commander of the Northern Virginia Army, got to make sure, right? On board, do you know his name of his trusty steed?
No idea.
He had 5, but he had one favorite one, which is the white one that everyone sees. He had a couple gray ones. I don't remember their names. Traveler.
That's right.
Traveler.
Which also happens to be the name of the USC mascot, which will now get canceled.
I'm sure it will. And we'll talk about that as we wrap up everything on the show. Robert E. Lee formally surrendered to Ulysses S. Grant at the I always butcher the name.
Appomattox
Courthouse. I can never I don't know why. It's one of those names that you just doesn't roll off.
A bunch of them.
Just doesn't roll off the tongue well.
Just does not.
Surrendered to Lee, or surrendered to Grant at that battle, and essentially laid the foundation for the ultimate surrender of the Confederate, Army, and bringing the Civil War to its climax and end.
Yes. Now, one one of the things that made, we can debate the merits of the Civil War
Sure.
one way or the other. The reality of it, it was fought. Was it the right reason? Was it the wrong reason? One of the most interesting things I found out, neither side had any idea it would last that long.
Nope. In fact, now granted, I grew up in the North, so it was referred to me as the Battle of Bull Run, but for all those south of the Mason-Dixon line, known as the Battle of Manassas Junction.
Right.
And that too tells you a
know
little
why
bit
that is?
Because, well, he who writes
The town
is
was named
Manassas.
Manassas.
Yeah, I thought you were asking why. Like, it was because I grew up in the North, and he who wins history writes the books, so to speak.
And I will say this, and it's not a justification of any cause, but my younger brother,
Yep.
my baby bro, as drama would call him, reference to the great HBO miniseries Entourage.
Love that show.
It was awesome. Awesome stuff. But I refer to Baby Bro. He is an absolute historian when it comes to the Civil War, and he has spent a lot of his Marine Corps career stationed in Virginia. He can do a description of battlefields that even had my teenager riveted. There we go.
Yep.
We see Lee in his best uniform surrendering to Grant, and Grant is actually depicted here. He actually showed up. He didn't even have his rank on.
Nope. And ironically, in all this, so many of the senior military officers were all classmates at West Point together.
Yes.
And ironically, Lee graduated 1 in his class. Grant graduated 3rd to last, I think, in his class. Ironically, and Lee, the stoic, always, uniform, beard, everything just perfectly.
He was a true Southern gentleman.
Yes. Grant, more of a
Drunkard.
yeah, a very famous line came out of the movie when, and this was not movie, but in history, when Lincoln appointed Grant commander, all his Secretary of Defense at the time, I don't remember.
Secretary of War. Is what
Secretary
it was
of War,
called.
yes.
Yeah.
Said, why are you putting Grant in charge? He's a drunk. And Lincoln responded back, find out what he's drinking and give it to the rest of my officers.
Exactly.
And because he understood warfare. That was the only thing that Grant was truly successful in, was being a military officer. But we'll go in there. The amount of respect they all had for each other, even though they were opposing sides, they were all classmates together. They were all friends at one point.
We often forget, we think of two separate nations when we talk about the Civil War. But these were brothers fighting against brothers.
Neighbor
Lee and
versus
Grant
neighbors.
had both served in the Mexican-American War, which served as a strong training ground. Remember, most of our officers and NCOs from the War of 1812 had aged out of the service, if you will. Mm-hmm. Most of the combat action were in various wars against different Indian tribes. We'll do another show on that issue by itself. It will come into play next week when we talk about the most famous 18 minutes in Texas history, and we'll talk about, much like we're going to talk about today, we'll talk about how that impacts or has a greater, the ripple, excuse me, what I'm looking for is the ripple effect.
Exactly.
And how that ripple effect. But they had fought together, Grant and Lee, in the Mexican-American War.
They were on the same landing craft when they landed.
Know that.
There's a, if you would watch, I don't remember which movie came out first. I think it was Gods and Generals.
Okay.
In there, and they're talking about when they were landing in Mexico, they were one cannonball shot away of both Lee and Grant being killed on that same landing craft. And they're talking about, there was a conversation, I believe, I can't remember the actors in there, but I think it might have been Longstreet and Lee were having a conversation at dinner. They're talking about how, today we're fighting each other when just a few years ago we were both on the same landing craft. Right. I just remember that. It's like, wow, to think how different history could have been if that cannonball shot was just...
It is very, very interesting to see and talk about. So we're gonna fast forward almost 100 years.
Yep.
On this date, in April of 1941, we're going to talk about the USS Nyback, which you can see on the screen right now. Can we enlarge that photo at all? Basically, it was a U.S. destroyer that had gone to the aid of U.S. ships that were taking supplies to England, and wound up depth charging and I believe destroying a German submarine. The U-boat that was causing the havoc. They were rescuing survivors, but this would be the first official shots that America took in World War II, even though it would be another 8 months
before Pearl Harbor.
8 months until we officially entered the war, but we were shooting at people. There is a movie out. It's a Tom Hanks movie. It doesn't tell the Nyback story, but it does tell the story of what it was like commanding one of those destroyers. It's called Greyhound. It didn't get a lot of play, and part of it was released during COVID, but it is an outstanding movie and study in command.
It is an excellent movie. Definitely one that I enjoyed. And you're right. Had it not been for COVID, it probably would have done quite well, like most Tom Hanks World War.
Tom Hanks. He
Tom Hanks alone does pretty good, and the fact that his World War II history movies have historically been pretty spot on.
I cannot wait until the long-rumored 8th Air Force is released.
That's great.
For those who don't know that story, the 8th Air Force was the American B-17s that flew over Germany. For those of us who enjoy military history movies, one of the best studies in command, we actually spent an afternoon watching it at TBS, is 12 O'Clock High with, I want to say Gary Stewart, but that's not right. Oh.
Jimmy Stewart?
No, it wasn't Jimmy Stewart. And it's not Gary Cooper. The other strong leading man who was actually not a bad comedic actor. Oh, my God, I can't believe I can't remember this. Well,
we're going to have to circle back to that one.
The movie, we'll come back. We're going to do another show just featuring great war movies with great war themes. But that is a great study in leadership.
Gregory Peck.
Gregory Peck.
Thank you so much.
That was bothering me too. I was like, I've seen this. How do I not know?
And for those who don't know, that's Kathy Ward, our lovely producer. She rivals Vanna White in beauty and just trumps her in intelligence. So it works out really well. And we're gonna kind of stay on the World War II theme.
Yep. Want me to hit this one up?
Tie this in.
Right.
So we're going to start tying everything we're talking about in to 2 days of remembrance that are going on, and we want to talk about drilling the significance.
And this one is going to be kind of deep. On this day in history, in 1942, now keep in mind, there's a very important thing to remember. There's a very famous line by another World War II general, a general who actually surpassed Lee in total points earned at West Point when he graduated. A gentleman
points earned or demerits?
Points earned.
Lee.
Lee. Not Grant. Lee. Lee, not Grant. Both Lee and Grant, I think, were the only two to graduate from the U.S. Military Academy with 0 demerits, or maybe only one.
Interesting.
I think they only had like 1 demerit each, or I mean they earned the fewest ever demerits in history and that was Douglas MacArthur.
Wow.
Douglas MacArthur's famous line as he was leaving prior to the Japanese taking over the Philippine Islands was, "I shall return." We all know those words. And he left.
JP, can we throw up that map of the Philippines?
And when he left, very much against his wishes,
Yes.
Very much against his wishes, but as a general, as a military man, he knew the significance and the importance of what he was doing. The island of the Philippines and the Bataan Peninsula was captured by the Japanese. 75,000 Filipinos and American troops were captured at Bataan. And they went and became some of the most famous POWs, which is what we're talking about, because yesterday was National POW Remembrance Day. Now, being a POW in of itself is horrific beyond words. It's an awful situation to be in. This death march that they went on virtually made every other POW situation almost a pleasure cruise compared to what these men went through. The Japanese forced them, injured or not injured, healthy, not healthy, to march
65
miles nonstop. And if anyone had fallen, they weren't shot. They were ran through with a bayonet.
Or clubbed.
Or
beaten.
There was no mercy. None. Weakness was not tolerated, and the brutality that these men faced. There's a slogan outside White Sands Missile Range where every year around this time you have the Bataan Death March that goes through White Sands, New Mexico, where, it's a giant marathon. It's the only marathon I think I'll ever probably participate. I noticed I did not use the word run, participate in. And their slogan goes something like, no mamas, no papas, no God, just the bastards of Bataan. And these men endured just horrific treatment. I think maybe a cup of rice a day, maybe a cup of water, if that.
And they had already been. Keep in mind that, so the map shows the island of Mindanao. Excuse me, not Mindanao. What am I talking about? The island of Luzon. Yep. Excuse me. The Philippines is an archipelago with 7,100 islands in it. Yep. Some big, some small. You see the dot that is Corregidor, which is this tiny island that they put a concrete structure that looks like a massive battleship. It still sits there today. It is one of my regrets is that I did not go to Corregidor. We would go into under where it says the Route of Death. There is a bay called Subic Bay, where we used to have an incredible port. The Navy ships would pull in, and as a Marine, we deployed aboard Navy ships.
That we learned how to make that drink that you kept on feeding me on my birthday.
Absolutely.
Yeah, a couple years ago.
So we're going to tangent a little bit. We're going to talk about the QB Special, which was the drink served famously poolside at the QB Officers Club.
And later we drank a few on my birthday a couple years ago.
Yes, we had a lot of fun, and we were banging golf balls. So a couple of topics from today. But the Bataan Death March. So what happened is on December 8th, remember we were on the other side of the international date line, the Japanese attacked Clark Field, which was the big, at the time, Army Air Corps base, and attacked Subic Bay, and then invaded the island of Luzon. The Americans were slowly driven back until their last stand was made at Corregidor. They were on 1/4 rations, which means they were eating 1/4 of what you would normally consume in the course of a day. They were starved. They were out of ammunition. They were sick. These were not healthy people that were forced onto this march. It was absolutely horrific. The map shows the rescue of POWs. That is the story that is depicted in the book Ghost Soldiers. They made the movie with Benjamin Bratt was Great Raid, which did a pretty good job, but I enjoyed the book because it really got into the challenges, and there was debate as to whether we should invade the Philippines when MacArthur did return, or whether we should invade Taiwan, which was much closer to the main island of Japan. I don't know. there were tactical reasons to go to Taiwan. I should say tactical, probably strategic. MacArthur had promised to return. MacArthur and his father had been the viceroy of the Philippines.
Keep in mind, they owned half the Philippines at the time.
Yeah.
So though he had personal reasons.
He had some personal reasons there, too. But they were revered in the Philippines.
Still to this day.
Absolutely. Yeah, they are.
Yeah, you cannot say a negative word about MacArthur in the Philippines.
At this point in time, the Philippines was effectively a colony of the U.S. It was a territory, much like Guam is today. But the U.S. has never been, despite claims otherwise, an imperialist nation. The plan was always to return the Philippines or to create, like we did in Cuba, a free nation, well, until Castro took over, because it ain't free anymore. But the Philippines has their own elections. They run their own affairs, and that was always the plan. And quite frankly, if it had not been for World War II, the Philippines would have been returned to independence somewhere in the 50s, most likely.
Yep.
Plans were already written and in place, and they were working towards it. But the story of the Great Raid is they wound up saving over 1,000 U.S. POWs in that raid.
Yep. Combination of the Apache,
no doubt,
Apache Scouts.
The Apache Scouts. So we'll talk about that. We'll make an entire show just about that raid and rescuing those POWs. And I've always fallen on, if we had invaded Taiwan, those POWs would have been killed. In fact, at the time of the raid, knowing that MacArthur had landed, those POWs were within 3 to 5 days of being executed.
Mass execution, absolutely. 100%. Because you have to understand the Japanese culture at the time was surrender was the greatest dishonor.
Yes.
You know,
they looked codes.
They looked at it, if you surrendered, you were, so, you know, death before dishonor was definitely the way of was it the way of the samurai, or
it was somewhat related to the samurais, but the samurai were in fact different. It was the Bushido code. Where the emperor was a god.
Yep.
And so that's what that was. So before we leave the Philippines and we move to the other side of the world, but we stay in World War II, and again, these events that ripple effect and impact us today, we want to pay tribute to John Duncan Buckley, I believe is how you pronounce his last name. He was a lieutenant commander who commanded Motor Torpedo Squadron 3. They were operating in the Philippines at the time. Here is a picture of troops on the Bataan Death March, and it is amazing. There were a couple of attempts to overrun the guards because there weren't that many guards. So going a little bit backwards here. But we wanted to mention the lieutenant commander for two reasons. One, because his actions would earn him the Medal of Honor for his operations in the Philippine waters. He would be responsible for his PT boats, would be responsible for sinking multiple planes, several Japanese ships, but he would also be the one who would get General MacArthur and his family and his staff from the Philippines and the island of Luzon to the island I referenced before, Mindanao, which was about 100 miles away probably, but in waters that were being patrolled by the Japanese Navy. They absolutely controlled the water around there. And from Mindanao, MacArthur was escaped to Australia aboard a submarine. They could not risk flying him out. Well, they'd already flown the B-17s that hadn't gotten destroyed at Clark Field out of the Philippines as we were trying to take all war material we could. But the other thing about the lieutenant commander, go way back in the John Wayne war movies. There is a great John Wayne movie. Again, another movie that really focuses on the theme of leadership. It's called They Were Expendable, and very much the PT boats, and this is what President John F. Kennedy was driving when he was run over by a Japanese destroyer. Very much the PT boats were considered expendable. They were beneath the dignity of a lot of naval officers at the time who considered battleships to be the ultimate weapon. And one thing that World War II proved is if you're not evolving, you're dying. Because we went from battleships to aircraft carriers. I'm not sure what the next evolution will bring. Probably unmanned missiles and drones and things like that. But that
Why
again,
do I see the top Navy brass cringing at the thought? I know the Air Force brass hates the idea of drones, you know.
And it's one of the things that, unfortunately, and another one of our noted tangents, that has always handicapped us, or two things. One, we're always preparing to fight the next war.
Yep.
And the one nice thing about my brother being in a fairly significant position to know about a lot of this stuff, I know the Marine Corps and the Navy and the Army are, in fact, working to fight the next war. We're going to hop to this one in just a second. This is a very significant picture, but we wanted to honor Lieutenant Commander Buckley for earning the Medal of Honor on this day I'm not sure when he earned it.
Well,
not really important. But
10 April. 10 April. 10 April, 1942.
1942. Okay. So more than likely that was awarded to him by Douglas MacArthur. His actions were unquestionably heroic.
Yep.
Let's
fast forward to
Let's go to the other side of the
the
world.
other part of World War II. And this is very significant because it has kind of an effect towards us right now in history and time. And that is on today marks the anniversary of when the Nazis destroyed the Jewish homes, buildings, and businesses, you know, which
This
led
is
to the
1940, correct?
Yeah, 39. 39, where the start of the rounding up of the Jews and anyone who was different and opposed to the master race, if you will, you know, the Aryan race, the concentration camps and ironically, historically, this is also the date where they were liberated. How history played a role. These camps, much like the Bataan Death March, these were death camps. While they were classified as work camps by the Nazis, they were really experimental and death camps for any who entered them. There, you know, we've all heard the German phrase, the final solution. I can speak on some personal level on this. Back in 2000, I was over stationed in Germany, and I don't want to call it an honor.
You've actually been to, no, you were at Dachau.
Yeah, I did not attend this Rich World. Keep in mind, there were hundreds of camps, large and small. The largest of which I believe was Auschwitz in Poland, which is the most notorious and famous. But Dachau is definitely on the list. When I was stationed in Germany back in 2000, I went and I visited Dachau, which is right outside München or Munich, depending on how you want to pronounce it. I will tell you this. I'm not a overly spiritual man, nor do I necessarily believe in supernatural. But if there was ever a time where you feel death and ghost-like figures, you visit yourself one of these concentration camps. To understand the gravity, the absolute inhumane treatment that the Nazis, and I use the word Nazis versus Germans because there is a very big distinct difference between the two. The German people were not Nazis. Nazis were Nazis, and that is as clear as I can make it.
They were different.
Yeah.
It is interesting that on the exact same day as the start of Broken Glass, we see Americans liberate, and it's called Buchenwald.
Right.
That's the picture that we are seeing. Although I don't think the picture was taken on that date. Because
probably not, because I'm sure Eisenhower was
right
probably not there when Leonard, but
the first American units would liberate, and they would be absolutely appalled. The almost words almost do not
They
describe
did
it.
not.
Let's throw up the next
and you
picture.
can't describe it unless you've been there. And even today, I remember going through the camp at Dachau, and you see these types of images, but that's not what gets you. Is when you see the shoes
Oh, my Lord.
and the glasses and some of the personal effects of those who were tortured and ultimately executed in these giant gas chambers, and the ovens that they were cooked in afterwards. The justice and the train station that goes into Dachau is the same train station that they rode into these camps, and they walked. I'm telling you right now, that was probably the most life-changing moment in my life, to see that, to witness it, and to feel that thing. And that's where we were talking about how the ripple effect, and we'll touch on it a little now and probably close it some more. You ask a Jewish family or anyone from Germany, survivors of this, why aren't we tearing down these camps? Why aren't we destroying that part of history? The Jewish and the German people say no. They say they want that as a remembrance, to never forget what happened. They are the anti-cancel culture group. And that is something I think us as Americans need to take a really good, deep look into. We can't erase what happened in our past. I'm not saying we don't have things that we did horribly wrong in our country. We did do some humanity tragedies. We're guilty as anyone.
Absolutely.
No one is denying that. But to sit there and remove statues and names and events from history and not talking about it only leads to you to repeating it. You look at the German people.
I'm going to share a little story.
Please.
We're going to go back to our very first
Topic?
segment.
Yep.
Topic. There we go. I couldn't find the word. Sometimes I get lost for the words. But we're talking about Robert E. Lee at Appomattox. And in uptown Dallas, just very near Turtle Creek, there is Robert E. Lee Park.
Is it still called Robert Lee Park, or have they changed that?
I'm going to come to
All
that.
right.
I'm going to come to that. So there was this big hoo-ha-ha. We're going to remove Robert E. Lee's statue because he's got a statue. It's a fairly frequent image of him astride traveler on his trusty steed. And so they finally found somebody to actually buy it, because the city of Dallas, in an incredibly wise move, said, well, if you want this removed, we're not going to pay for it, which is how we prevented a lot of statues in Denton from being torn down, because my recommendation to a friend of mine was to say, hey, fine, you want to tear them down? I'm voting for it. You raise the money for it. And all the little activists, I got to do something, got to raise money, and ran away. So they found somebody, and they took the statue out, and it was very interesting because about 60 days later, they did a man-on-the-street style interview, and they were interviewing basically the types of people that generally you would think would be opposed to the statue. And they said, so how's your life better? What are you talking about? Well, the statue's gone. So what? It doesn't matter. It doesn't make any difference. And if you want to change the name of the building, fine, pay for it. If you want to take the statue down, fine, pay for it. Because what you're trying to do is erase part of history. Now, in an interesting bit of actual irony, the park is still named Robert E. Lee Park. Nobody cares.
Exactly.
It doesn't matter.
But what they do care.
Most important, let me finish this.
Sure.
And we'll jump into that. Tell me how you're going to do something to make the world better. How are we going to, for example, certain groups of people feel like they're oppressed in America. Okay, fine. How do we help you break the cycle of poverty? And these people generally, they're in poverty. How do we help you break the cycle of poverty? What are we going to do to help that? I had an interesting LinkedIn debate. So the academic types all think that advanced degrees, So getting a bachelor's degree is automatically going to earn you a better job or a better life. And there was a time in America that was probably true. But today, it's about computers. You want a really good job? Go start getting your computer certificates.
Or better yet, get your trade certificates, because our trades industry is about to go belly up in a hard way because so many are retiring out. And guess what? I can tell you this in Texas, and I only speak about Texas. Do you realize that after that big little storm we had a few weeks? Yeah, big little, you know?
Big little?
Big little.
Kind of like jumbo shrimp?
Exactly.
Sounds like a band.
Anyway, the storm we had.
Referring to the ice storm that we had.
The ice storm we had.
100-year level storm.
Do you know how many plumbers, HVAC guys, electricians, right now, they're still working on repairing, and it's going to be for a long. Those trade levels, those men and women are making bank. Serious.
They're doing it without going $100,000 in debt to get a college degree.
Yep.
They are doing it within a year of getting out of high school, and going and interning. And one of the things that I have advocated for a long time, it's we need more skilled labor training.
Absolutely. I wish they'd bring back shop. I mean, do you remember, in fact, I was having this conversation last night with my wife and all that. Do you remember?
You're sending Katie to shop?
No. We were having a conversation about that because, for example, when I went to high school, I had a kid in our high school in our automotive shop. And, of course, he had the coolest car ever. I can't remember the year. I want to say it was a 72 SS. And, of course, you show up to the shop class with a 72 SS to get work done. Shop teacher is going to give you everything you want.
What a great automobile. Tell me it was a ragtop.
Yep. And they rebuilt all over his 4 years in high school. Him and the shop teacher and all, they all worked on this car to make it just awesome. Where's that these days? You know, that I haven't spoken to him obviously since I graduated high school. No, nothing negative, just I'm in Texas. That's in the Northeast. Where is that? Why don't we have those types of things to bring that? Because that is so critical. I look at my kids today and I'm like, you don't know how to do any of these things that back in our day, we learned how to.
Well, but I will say this because I have tried to help Travis a little bit. You can't really work on a modern car.
Yes, certain things
without some highly expensive equipment. But that doesn't mean there isn't incredible opportunity. I've done business with Firestone for a long time. I know that they've got a great program of bringing people in, developing their skills, and then promoting them up through the system. And their store managers are making $100,000 a year. Now,
exactly.
You don't get there instantly, but it's for the people who are what I
but
call
you gotta work
gearheads
toward
who love working on cars. You get to do something you really enjoy.
But teach our kids you can still do this on even modern cars. Yep. Change the oil and change the tires.
Absolutely.
You know, I know how to change tires. You know, if I had told find where the lug nuts are, he doesn't even know what a lug nut is probably.
That is true. It's a good thing. Travis and I are actually going to work on that this weekend.
Excellent.
Really good thought. I don't know if Travis has ever changed a tire, and he's going to need to know it because he'll be doing driver training soon.
But back to
the Holocaust. Let us not forget this. Let us not cancel the Holocaust. Let us embrace everything that was wrong about it.
Exactly, and learn from that. I mean, that is so important in history to remember. Arguably one of the darkest periods in world history was the atrocities that happened in Europe.
Now, and I'm going to spin off of that just a little bit, and we go to we're going to talk about two communist countries.
Yep.
And part of this came out of World War II. So what a lot of people don't know is the nationalist Chinese and the communist Chinese had banded together against the Japanese. But as the war wound down, Mao Zedong and Chiang Kai-shek, who were the leaders of each of these two groups, battled, and eventually Chiang Kai-shek got pushed, if you will, out to Taiwan. Now, the Chinese continue to threaten Taiwan. The Chinese believe in a one China system. I think it's about time for the world to say, no, China, there are two Chinas. Taiwan is nationalist Chinese, and deal with it.
Yep.
So we pop up and we talk about MIA Day, and this very much ties together, but also on this day, and it's so interesting that so many things that directly relate to never forgetting our POWs and our missing in action, and we still have people that are missing in action.
From the Vietnam War, I wish I had remembered the statistic, but the number of never returned, if you were to go to the Vietnam Memorial in D.C., the wall, there is a diamond over names that they're presumed to be dead,
right,
but have never been either discovered alive or found. In fact, when you go there, and they say if one is ever found, they get a circle with a T over it. To this day, there's not one of those.
Not one.
Not one.
So we have, in our history, we have created the Tomb of the Unknown Soldier to honor those that are fallen. But do you know why?
Is for the hope and for the memory that when family members go to visit the tomb, that could possibly be their loved one in there.
Do you know why there is not one for the Vietnam
I
War?
do, because in 1998, the DNA was found of an Air Force major, I think he was, Captain Major, was discovered and identified. But did you know what they did? This is kind of cool. And I was actually there for this on the day they were turned in. And I got pictures to show you on it. What do they do with the granite of when SIG was commissioned to cut, they're part of the commissioning group to cut the granite of the tomb to, unearth the casket. I don't know what whatever it's called. They had a vacuum and they sucked up all the dust from the granite. When SIG made the brand new SIG 21
You're talking about
pistols,
6 Sauer, by the way.
Yep. Pistols for the tomb sentinels to march, they encased in the finish of every one of those pistols, 21 pistols, the dust from that tomb.
Interesting.
And I was there the day they received those, and actually got to hold one of them. I think I held number 3.
Thanks to DNA and forensic science, we will never have another tomb of an unknown soldier because no soldier will be unknown.
Yep.
But we do have soldiers that we just literally did not know who they were. And we honor them, and that's actually a topic for another show, is talking about the tomb of the unknown soldier.
Here lies an American soldier unbeknownst to all but God.
And these men have given their last full measure of devotion to our nation. So as we continue to tie everything in, and it's just eerie how often April 10th keeps popping up. In 1997, one-time fighter pilot and former guest of the Hanoi Hilton, former POW Pete Peterson, was confirmed by the U.S. Senate as the first post-war U.S. ambassador to Vietnam. It's kind of interesting. Our one-time enemies, Japan, Italy, Germany, Vietnam, have now started to become staunch allies. It is. We can talk about everything that's wrong about America, and today it's easy for many to self-loathe about America. But it is amazing that this is a country that at its heart is much more good than evil.
100%. And like we said, we've done wrong. America has done plenty of things that probably could have done better. But you want to know what? And I've said it before, and you have said similar things. If you don't like it, go somewhere else.
Yeah, really.
You know, we're not perfect, but we're the best damn game in town.
So there's a very famous...
I'm saying amen.
Yep.
Our producer's doing stuff, and we
cheering
can't.
y'all on.
Couldn't quite figure out what it was. We told you that Kathy is a former cheerleader. She's still that hot, but we can get away with stuff like that on this show because I'm an old fat chauvinist. What can I say? And I wear my own skin well. But we talk about things like that, and I want to jump over real fast to do a little bit of plug. Speaking of people that we are trying to remember and honor, and we'll get to that in just a second. But one of the things that we have lost, and I can give you a great example of how quickly we can find it, is we are so busy self-loathing. Oh, and I forgot. Let me come to that picture. Speaking of great Americans, no, leave that up. This is Sam Johnson speaking of POWs. I wanted to wrap up the POW talk. I wound up, and it was pure happenstance. It was not planned at all. That is Sam Johnson and I, Congressman Johnson. And you can see he is older and arthritic, but he is stooped over because of some of the abuse that he took in the Hanoi Hilton. And I was his last constituent visit as a congressman. He was a great man.
How many years was he? Was it 5? About 5.5?
It was about 5 years, yes. Yep. He was in there for quite a while. And it was a great day when they are all returned. By the way, and I forgot to throw this picture up, I did not know this at the time, but the very famous picture of the airman, the Air Force officer, walking off the plane in his teenage daughter in her miniskirt. Okay, so at the time I was in high school, that's what you cared about. Running just with the overwhelming joy to see her father for the first time in years. And I was an Air Force brat. I had friends whose fathers were living in the Hanoi Hilton. So it was very emotional. That iconic picture was actually Sam Johnson. I did not know that until very recently. In fact, Kathy Ward, our wonderful former cheerleader, told me that on this show. So I wanted to wrap up the POW section. I am absolutely honored to have known Sam Johnson. He was
great
a
American,
warm, gracious man. You can't say enough good things about him. But to talk about, this is a man who endured true hell. His grievances were very real, and yet he returned and he tried to help build America. He served us in Congress, just an absolute great individual. So I'm going to spin from this, and let's throw up that last picture. There's another gentleman. We'll do another show more on him, but in about 30 days, on the 14th of May, we are going to hold the 3rd annual Arlie Ermey Memorial Golf Classic. And for those who don't remember who Arlie was, you will certainly remember his face. He was the famous Gunnery Sergeant Hartman, the drill instructor from the movie Full Metal Jacket. When we flash that face up, people remember it. We're going to be out at the Bear Creek West Golf Course. The website, if you want more information, is www.gunnygolf.com. And the one thing that I will say, and we all 100% of the proceeds are going to go to support Homeless Veteran Services of Dallas, which is one of our strongest veteran service organizations, but unfortunately, it's one of our poorest funded. So we're going to try to change that.
Absolutely. And, to echo a little bit on what you're saying with that is, it's amazing we hear, and we certainly appreciate it, during times of conflict, everybody rallies around the troops. But as conflicts start to die down, it doesn't become the hot topic of the story in the news anymore. Unfortunately, the funds tend to dry up, and organizations like, Veteran Services down there in Dallas and others much like them, they suffer. They suffer in the sense that they're trying to provide a real, not a fluff service, but a real service to real men and women who need that help and support. And I cannot...
Not just men and women, I found.
And the children.
I thought about this. Families.
Absolutely.
Very much supporting these men and women and their families.
We need to make sure, just like in history, we don't forget who these men and women were. Despite why the reasons they're in the situation are, this organization, I will tell you right now, I have personally been down there numerous amount of times. The staff, their mission, their goal, their purpose, first rate. They are truly there to make sure that American heroes, and they are given an opportunity to right their lives and get themselves to a better place.
And one of the things that's a lot of fun, what you were talking about, writing their lives, is so true. To get to know the people that have come through there, that all they needed was a little bit of assistance. They didn't need a handout. They just needed a hand up. Ken Waterston, who runs that, he was the 2007 Marine Corps League's National Marine of the Year. He's an incredible person.
That is putting it mildly.
But he has been able to turn lives around. And it's interesting.
Yep.
We were on a Zoom call with Medal of Honor recipient and former Assistant Secretary of the Navy, Colonel Barney Barnum. And he credits Barney Barnum with turning his life around. Being that Marine officer that took him under his wing. He was a drinker and a fighter in his youth, like a lot of Marines.
Shocker.
About as typical a Marine as you're going to get, but he put his life on a better path. And that's the point I was trying to get to earlier that I don't think I said very well. I think we need to return Americans to focus on. Let's not focus on what's wrong. And we get that. We can discuss that.
Yeah.
I'm not trying to hide from that. I don't want to cancel what we did wrong. What I want to do is figure out, how do we fix it?
How do we
make
improve
your
the
life
situation
better today?
Exactly.
And when your life is better, everybody else's life is better. You've got a better job.
Ripple effect.
The ripple effect. And it can grow. And right now, unfortunately, we are in a terrible negative downward spiral.
We're more interested. You know what? And I'm going to draw another tie. Do you know why the Nazi Party came to power? It's because they did this. They blamed the Treaty of Versailles on all that were different than the Aryan nation.
Exactly
they
right.
identified someone else as the problem. Well, guess what? We're doing that despite what political party you affiliate with or choose. Stop doing this. Start doing this, saying, hey, I'm going to fix this. I'm going to take charge. I'm going to make a difference. I'm going to make one thing better. Because otherwise, to be honest with you, we're no better than some of those other horrible nations, horrible leaders, horrible regimes that at some point in time turned a great nation into a really bad nation. And if we keep on canceling that culture, keep on canceling those ideas and remembering that, we're going to fall into it. Remember,
I'm going to give you a one-word absolute proof of what you just said.
What's that?
Let's look at Venezuela.
Great example.
They went from the most prosperous nation south of the U.S., includes Central America. Nobody was doing better than Venezuela, standard of living-wise, across the board. But they decided, no, we're going to go socialist. And now they are a cesspool.
Yep. And America, wake up. We did wrong. Let's get over that. Yep. Let's figure out how we can improve, how we can make it. And not only that, but stop doing this. Start pointing back to you and say how I'm going to make it better. We can't change the past. We can only affect the future. Plain and simple. Remember that next time, who you vote for, that's your choice. But do it for the right reasons, not just because you don't like somebody. Do it for, okay, you think we may be in a better direction going this way. That's fine. I can respect that. But don't be another Venezuela. That is a beautiful example. America,
Mac Brown would say, scares me to death.
Yep. Well, by hearing those music in the background means this show is about to wrap up. But you know what? The history lessons are going to continue here in the show. And we will not forget history. So for Chuck and I, hoorah and hoorah as always. And we will see you all next Saturday right here on Kilroy's Conversation.